Welcome to Deep Stoicism Podcast, where we delve into the timeless teachings of Stoicism to enrich our modern lives. Get ready to explore powerful ideas, profound reflections, and practical tools to face life's challenges with wisdom and serenity. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a concept that trips up a lot of people, even those who've been studying Stoicism for a while: the dichotomy of control.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ideas that sounds simple at first, but then has like a lot more nuance once you really start digging in.
Right. You hear a lot of people kind of sum it up as you control your thoughts and reactions, but not the outside world. So you
No.
focus on your inner world and you'll be happy. But something about that always felt a bit too neat and tidy to me.
It is tidy, and that's part of the problem. The original concept from Epictetus isn't so much about control as it is about cause and responsibility. And a big part of the confusion comes from that word control itself. It sets up this unrealistic expectation that we should be able to perfectly manage our emotions and reactions like flipping a switch, which just isn't how humans work.
That makes a lot of sense. We're not robots. So if we ditch the word control, what's a more accurate way to think about what the Stoics are getting at?
Well, remember, the original Greek phrase F, it doesn't translate directly to within our control. It's more like depends on us or
Right.
up to us. And that subtle shift in language makes a huge difference.
So it's less about having this absolute power over everything inside us and more about recognizing what we're actually responsible for.
Exactly. To use a classic example, imagine someone insults you. The insult itself, their action, that's not up to you. It's a product of their own character and choices, but your reaction to that insult, whether you get angry, let it roll off your back, or choose to respond with kindness, that's where you have a say. It depends on you.
It's interesting.
Y-
But doesn't it feel like we do have some control over our reactions? How do we reconcile that feeling with this idea of depends on us?
That's where things get really fascinating. The Stoics weren't saying we have no influence over our inner world, but they were emphasizing the difference between what we can directly choose and what's influenced by factors outside of our immediate control. Think about trying to change a deeply ingrained habit or dealing with the lingering effects of a past trauma. In those cases, simply deciding to feel or react differently isn't always enough. It takes dedicated work and practice.
Okay, that's starting to paint a clearer picture for me. So if we're not striving for this total absolute control, what is the right way to think about this dichotomy? Where does our true influence lie?
The Stoics encourage us to shift our focus from what we can't control to what we can. Instead of getting lost in anxieties about what might happen, we can ask ourselves, what's the best version of myself that I can bring to this situation? What values and principles do I want to embody, regardless of the outcome?
That's a powerful question. It takes the pressure off trying to manipulate external outcomes and puts back on cultivating our own inner resources. But I think a lot of people struggle with that because it can feel like giving up control.
It's not about giving up. It's about redirecting your energy to where it can actually make a difference. And to help with that, the Stoics developed practices like self-reflection, mindfulness, and virtue cultivation.
So these Stoic practices you mentioned, self-reflection, mindfulness, virtue cultivation, how do those actually help us navigate the dichotomy of control in our daily lives?
Well, they help us shift our focus from worrying about things we can't control to really understanding and working on the things that we can. It's like training your mind to become more aware of what's actually up to you and what isn't.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
But can you give me a more concrete example of how this plays out in real life? Say at work, for instance.
Absolutely. Imagine you're facing a tight deadline at work. It's easy to get caught up in anxieties about whether you'll finish on time, what your boss will say, what consequences might come if you don't. But none of those things are directly within your control. The dichotomy of control encourages you to ask yourself, what is up to me in the situation?
So instead of like freaking out about what might happen, I should be focusing on what I can actually do to meet the deadline.
Precisely. You can focus on managing your time, effectively working diligently, communicating clearly with your team, and seeking help when needed. You can control the effort you put in and the approach you take, even if you can't guarantee a specific outcome.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like shifting from a mindset of I need to control everything to a mindset of I'm going to focus on doing my best and then I'll accept whatever happens.
Exactly. And that acceptance piece is crucial. It doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. It means acknowledging that some things are simply beyond our control.
So how does this apply to something less tangible like relationships?
Think about a time when you felt anxious or insecure in a relationship. Maybe you were worried about whether someone liked you back or afraid of being rejected.
Oof, I think we've all been there at some point.
Right. In those situations, it's tempting to try to control the other person's feelings or behaviors. but that's ultimately futile and can even be counterproductive. The dichotomy of control reminds us that the only thing we can truly control is ourselves, how we choose to show up in the relationship, how we communicate our feelings, and how we treat the other person.
So instead of trying to manipulate the situation to get a certain outcome, I should focus on being the best version of myself and expressing my feelings honestly and respectfully.
Yes. And the amazing thing is that by focusing on what we can control, we often end up having a more positive influence on the things we can't.
That's so interesting. It's like this paradox: the more we let go of trying to control everything, the more we actually empower ourselves to navigate life's challenges with grace and effectiveness.
That's the beauty of Stoicism. It's not about becoming emotionless robots, but about cultivating a deep understanding of our own nature and the nature of the world around us. And by doing that, we can find true freedom and fulfillment even in the face of uncertainty.
I love that. It's about recognizing that we always have a choice in how we respond to whatever life throws at us. And that choice is where our true power lies.
Exactly. And the more we practice this, the stronger and more resilient we become.
It sounds like a lifelong journey of learning and growth. But where do we even begin? It feels a little overwhelming to think about applying this to every area of my life.
It can feel that way at first. That's why it's important to start small. The Stoics encourage us to focus on one area at a time. Choose one specific situation in your life where you tend to get caught up in trying to control things that are ultimately out of your hands.
So for me, that might be worrying about whether I'll get that promotion at work or trying to change someone else's political opinion.
Those are great examples. Now ask yourself, what are the things I can control in this situation? What aspects of my response can I work on even if the outcome isn't what I'm hoping for?
That's a really helpful framework. I can see how this could be a game changer for anyone who feels stressed, anxious, or overwhelmed by trying to control the uncontrollable.
And remember, it's a practice. There will be times when you slip up, when you get caught up in worry or frustration. But the key is to keep coming back to this principle, to keep reminding yourself of what's truly up to you.
This has been so enlightening. It feels like we've uncovered a whole new way of thinking about control, influence, and ultimately freedom. But I have a feeling there's even more to explore here.
There's always more to learn with Stoicism. It's a philosophy that unfolds gradually, revealing new insights and wisdom the more you engage with it.
Yeah, you're right. The more we talk about this, the more I realize how much depth there is to this concept. But for our listeners who are hearing this for the first time and want to start applying it to their own lives, where should they begin?
Well, I think the most important takeaway from today's deep dive is this. The Stoic dichotomy of control isn't about becoming some kind of superhuman who can control every aspect of life. It's about recognizing that true freedom comes not from trying to control the uncontrollable, but from understanding and mastering what is truly within our sphere of influence.
That feels very empowering. It's not about giving up control. It's about focusing our energy where it matters most, on our own choices, our responses, and the kind of person we want to be in the world.
Exactly. And that's a journey. It's not about achieving some perfect state of control, but about continually refining our understanding of what is and isn't up to us. We practice, we learn, we stumble, and we get back up again.
So it's a process of self-discovery as much as anything else.
Absolutely. And through that process, we can cultivate a sense of inner peace and resilience that allows us to navigate life's ups and downs with more grace and wisdom.
That sounds like a worthwhile pursuit. But I think for a lot of people, the hardest part is knowing where to start. It feels a little overwhelming to think about applying this to every area of my life.
It can feel that way at first. That's why it's important to start small. The Stoics encourage us to focus on one area at a time. Choose one specific situation in your life where you tend to get caught up in worrying about things that are outside of your control.
And then once they've identified that area, what should they do?
Ask yourself, what aspects of this situation are actually up to me? Maybe it's how you communicate, how you prepare, the attitude you choose to bring to the situation. And then how can you shift your focus and energy towards those things?
So it's about finding that inner locus of control, that place of resilience and wisdom that allows us to navigate even the most challenging situations with a sense of calm and purpose.
Precisely. And remember, it's a practice. It takes time, and you won't get it right every time. But each time you catch yourself trying to control the uncontrollable and gently redirect your focus inward, you're strengthening that inner core.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of the dichotomy of control and how it can help us live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you today.
This was Deep Stoicism Podcast. If this episode inspired you, put one of today's principles into practice and share it with others. Keep walking the path of wisdom, and we'll see you next time.